If you really want to know how deeply you love yourself, pay attention to how you treat yourself when your personal growth doesn't move based on your timeline, when the results haven't caught up yet, and all that's left in front of you are your limitations and the person you thought you could be but are not yet. This is usually when we start turning on ourselves. And that's where self-love becomes the difference between those who give up and those who keep going. Hello, beautiful. My name is Cici. And if you're someone who loves to set goals but struggles to follow through on them, you are not alone. I've been there too. That's why I basically turned my life into an ongoing experiment to figure out what it takes to be the type of person who sets goals and accomplish them. So, if becoming is your top priority this year, let's be friends. But before we talk about self-love, we need to talk about the mindset it operates from, because good habits, routines, systems can either support us or work against us if we treat self-love as something different from our personal development. Self-love is the mindset that we have to bring into the process of our becoming. For most people, we usually approach change with this belief that something about us is lacking. And when that becomes the foundation, self-love just cannot survive there, because growth starts to feel like self-rejection. When you see your present self as the obstacle to becoming the best version of you, you are subconsciously, in a way, accepting that a part of you needs to be abandoned. And that's when growth starts to feel urgent. That's when we start feeling like we should be further ahead by now, or that something needs to be fixed fast right now so that we can feel okay. But self-love approaches growth very differently. Instead of lack, it starts with the belief that your potential already exists within you. And from this place, growth is no longer about erasing yourself or a part of yourself, but instead, it's about giving yourself the structure that you need so that you can flourish. And I know this has been used a lot to illustrate this point because we are still missing the point. We know that a caterpillar has the potential to become a butterfly. The cocoon is not what turned it into butterfly. It's what gave it structure so that the caterpillar can turn into the butterfly. It simply provided that structure so that the transformation can actually happen. And that's what growth rooted in self-love looks like. You're not trying to escape yourself, because self-development is an expression of your love for yourself. And when you grow from that place, you are grounded instead of frantic. You are curious when you make a mistake instead of being self-critical. You become so patient with yourself instead of being pressured by time and people. And this is so important. Without this foundation, you will never see your fullest potential, because you are so busy trying to erase the very person that growth needs to work through. And that's why self-love matters way more than routines, habits, and systems. Once you approach your self-development out of that self-love, something becomes very clear. Self-love is not passive. It has rules. And those rules don't get tested when things are easy. In fact, it gets tested in specific moments during our progress. And if self-love breaks at any one of these stages, self-development becomes very unsustainable. And eventually, you will find yourself back at where you started, not because you failed, but because at some point, you have turned against yourself. So instead of talking about self-love as this feeling, let's talk about how it actually acts at every stage of our growth journey. If you click on this video, chances are you love growing as a person. We all love setting intentions. We love setting goals. We love making plans. But believe it or not, this is actually the first moment when our self-love gets tested. Because for most of us, when we set goals, we actually do it when our nervous system is dysregulated from pressure, comparison, even ambition. And to put this in the most simplest terms so that you can understand what I'm saying, I want you for a moment to reflect on all of the goals that you've set for yourself so far. And I want you to ask yourself, yourself? Did any of your goals come from frustration? Did it come from a feeling of you're running out of time or that you should be further ahead by now? Did you set it because you see everyone else moving forward except yourself? You see, when your baseline is stress, pressure, or urgency, you're no longer operating from growth. You're operating from survival. Goals set in survival mode are not acts of self-love. It's just an attempt to run away or fight the perceived threat. And sadly, when you're the one who's pushing yourself to be more motivated, more disciplined, just more, your system starts to experience you as the threat. Self-love at the goal-setting stage is not exciting, it's not sexy, it's not confident. It's all about safety. A self-loving approach means that excitement is no longer what sets the pace for us, but instead, it's our nervous system and our capacity. And that leads us to the first rule of self-love. So before you start reaching out for more and adding more things to your plate, it's so important that we ask ourselves first, do I have routines that support me right now? Do I have moments in my day when my body can just settle? Do I have space to check in, feel, and regulate? Do I understand how my energy fluctuates? You need something stable to return to before you start asking yourself for more. And if your goal right now is exactly that, which is to take care of your basic needs, that's in alignment with self-love. Self-love starts with partnership, not pressure. But self-love has taught me that instead of claiming a finished identity, I needed to commit to the process of building that. And it's amazing how just that slight change made it so much easier for me to become that identity. A big part of it is because process-based identity doesn't demand perfection from us. Instead, it builds self-trust. You're making a promise to yourself no matter how this unfolds, whether your progress is messy, it happens fast, or it's slow, you will not abandon yourself. At this stage of the personal development journey, self-love is simply teaching us focus on building self-trust. Learning that lesson before you start your personal development journey determines whether your growth will be sustainable or self-destructive. This is the stage that gets the least attention, even though this is where we spend most of our time, and this is where we actually do the work. This is the stage where we grind, we cry, we repeat the same process over and over again, hoping that one day the results will finally show up. And because it's so challenging, this is where self-violence begins. We start crossing our boundaries, we stop respecting our limits, we accept effort only if it produces outcomes. So basically, we mistake rigidity for self-love. But in reality, we are abandoning ourselves in the most critical stage. We do that because what self-love requires of us at this stage is really uncomfortable to accept, because it's asking us to slow down while we are doing the work. And that goes against everything that we have been taught about success, discipline, and reaching your full potential. But if everything we've been taught actually worked, there wouldn't be an entire industry fixing burnout. So if forcing and pushing has some serious side effects, it's time to follow the rules of self-love instead. It's asking us to measure and validate the effort instead of the outcome. And this is really hard because for most of us, we have been conditioned to believe that our value is based on what we produce or what we provide. After all, even the relationships that we have today that exist in our life, it's most likely because of what we bring to the table. So if we don't have that in our relationship, sometimes even in the most intimate relationships, then it becomes really hard to learn what that looks like. And that's where your personal development journey gives you that structure so that you can practice it for yourself. Growth is meant to be slow, to remind us that the only thing that is worth counting on is our effort. And self-love doesn't see effort as just something that is good enough. Effort is proof that you are still on your side no matter what. this is the kind of validation that we need to give our efforts. You have to believe that this builds consistency far more effectively than self-criticism ever could. We expect growth to be linear because we're not invested in ourselves for the long term. Self-love has no expiration date. It's not something you earn and then you lose. It stays with you for as long as the process takes. And because of that, self-love can accept the mess and the friction without turning it into a personal flaw. When you're truly committed to yourself, not just the version of you that crosses the finish line, patience becomes natural. You never see the need to use self-rejection as motivation because you don't see the struggles that you're facing as an evidence that something is wrong with you. So instead, you recognize friction for what it truly is, and that's your nervous system simply adapting to the change that you're going through. So at this stage of our self-development journey, self-love is simply reminding us love and growth is never about intensity. It's simply about staying with ourselves long enough for change to take root. So depending on your journey, if you're in the middle of pursuing your goal or after you've achieved it, there's usually a critical step that most of us tend to forget. So if you're still in action, most likely your inner voice probably goes,
"This is the price of growth. Just keep pushing."
And if you've achieved your goal, most likely you're in cloud 9 right now. You're feeling the high and you're super excited. You just can't wait to tackle the next thing so that you can use this momentum to keep going. And while effort and momentum do matter, both of these things carry their own risks. So this is when we usually push ourselves so much that we end up burning out before we reach our goals, or you can over-identify with progress so much that growth starts to feel exhausting and you end up resenting it. And this is where people not only quit their goals, but also end up just leaving self-development altogether. And one of my favorite books actually talked about this as one out of the 10 reasons why we don't change. And he talked about how whenever we reach a goal, what happens is people around us, and sometimes we even do it to ourselves, we get asked what's next all the time. While their intention may be pure and innocent, what this does, it creates that internal pressure that you or what you just did is not enough. And so naturally, this begs the question, is it possible for us to keep pushing ourselves while feeling enough and being content? And this is where self-love actually shows us how the two worlds can coexist. And once again, just like with the other two stages, self-love is asking us to pause long enough so that we can integrate what we have just learned. So the last two rules exist to protect us from treating ourselves like a machine and allow those two worlds to coexist together. Now, this rule may sound so obvious. Common sense does not mean common knowledge. And that's just the reality when it comes to this. We don't view rest as part of action. Instead, we view it as something that we earn at the end of the day. But our work depends on rest and recovery. Without rest, you basically just undo all of the work that you did in the beginning stages. And this is not about being easy on yourself. This is simply just how your brain works. Your brain needs time to catch up with the behavior. Neuroplasticity doesn't happen only when we are doing the action. It needs time to be integrated. That's why those people who truly love themselves, they schedule rest and recovery before they move on to the next push. This is how you stop that constant chasing to something that you become. Growth without reflection is just motion. So this is when you reflect without judgment and when you make the necessary adjustments to keep yourself in the game. And what's amazing about doing this process, this is when you get a little glimpse of whether your work is actually paying off. This is when your self-trust starts revealing itself to you. So start paying attention to how you talk to yourself about why certain things worked or didn't work. If the story still sounds like,
"I should have done better. I failed at this. I'm just not disciplined enough,"
that's still your self-rejection, making itself sound like it's just being honest. But if the story goes something like, that didn't work. I wonder, what is it about my system that created that friction? Or if you start asking, what did I need during that time that I didn't give myself? That's when you know something within you has shifted dramatically. You are no longer seeing yourself as the problem. Instead, you're seeing yourself as the partner in this process. You finally evolved. This is self-love in action. Self-love is not about how you feel about yourself when things are going well. Self-love is about how you treat yourself when your progress is slow, messy, and unclear. Self-love is not always loud and confident. In fact, self-love reveals itself on those quiet moments when you chose not to abandon yourself. And when you see yourself through every step of the way, that's when your fullest potential finally has the space to emerge.